Hello RC Drift fans. We're continuing with the setup of this Drift Art 2 chassis, and I've learned quite a lot even though I haven't even tuned the thing yet. So the first thing in my build video, I had this servo mounted in the far back position, and that's a bad idea. I'll show you why. Let me move it in the back. So here it's in the far back position. When the servo turns full lock, the suspension rod, the tie rod there to the steering link is blocking the servo from going back. It gets stuck here. And also you'll notice the wheels are not remotely parallel. This inside is totally different from the outside wheel. So that's why you want to have the servo in the forward position. Let me straighten that out. So it's just these two little bolts down here that adjust the servo spot. Okay, so now there's no binding with the servo because there's always enough of an angle with the steering rod that it doesn't bind. And then you'll also notice the wheels are far more parallel now. So that's essentially what you want to do. So if you build this thing, just mount the servo on the front, you'll save yourself a lot of time. Okay, so then the next thing after I did that is I want to adjust the wheels and stuff and the suspension. And I gotta give a shout out to a gentleman, Mohammed Farah. He has a YouTube video titled Micro RC Drifting Setup and Tuning. So search for that thing. It's from this year. And it's a 1 hour long video about setting up suspensions on these little drift cars, these 1/28th scale things. So he saved me a lot of time. And just like in his video, I set up my wheels to be 0 degrees everything. 0 toe in, toe out, 0 camber. And I'll just adjust them later on as I learn how this chassis feels. Okay, so after I set up the wheels, just adjusting, the steering links, the threads on them, I wanted to get into the suspension setup, the ride height. And so I realized that the original springs I installed were way too soft. I installed the softest springs that the kit came with. And so let me talk about that first here. The rear springs, I'll start with those because there's only 3 of them. Here are the 2. The first, let me get the camera. Alright, so these are the softest ones I installed. I didn't bother putting in the hardest ones. I just have the medium, the third ones in there. When I put the softest ones in, it was fine until I put weight on the chassis. And for me, I didn't even have the battery yet or the radio receiver. So I did have, these parts here, and I weighed those. And then I also weighed the body shell. I'm going to use this Kyosho AE86. And they came out to be 100 grams. So since I didn't really have, it's just easier to use some sort of simulated weight, really. So I have this giant nut zip tied to a spring that came off like an electric scooter, and this weighs around 100 grams. So I basically put that on the chassis, and then I realized very quickly that the springs I had just bottomed the thing out. So that's how I discovered I needed to swap out the springs. So for the rear, if you're going to run somewhere around 100 grams of weight, you want to have the medium springs in there. Now the front has 4 sets of springs. So these are the other 3. This is the one I put in originally in my build video, the softest. Then I put in the second softest, but even so, with the counterweight, it sank. The suspension didn't want to raise up. So I have the third spring that's not shown on my palm inside the car. I didn't bother with the 4th spring because I don't want to put in the hardest springs because then the thing would just bounce all over bumps and stuff. You want to have the softest springs possible, but they have to be hard enough to raise the chassis to maintain the ride height. Okay, so those are like the number 3 springs right there. Okay, now the ride height itself, I'm just following what Mohammed suggested and doing 2.5 millimeters clearance in the front and 2 millimeters in the back. So hold on here, let me get a different angle. So I happen to have just some metal washers. This is a metal titanium washer for motorcycles, and it's 2.2 millimeters thick, and this is an aluminum standoff or an aluminum washer that's 2.5 millimeters thick. So I just taped them down to a hard surface, which is, this is a tuning board that came from the seller Chan RC off Facebook. And so you can just, oh sorry, I had it backwards. So the nice thing about this Drift Art 2 is the ride height is very easily adjustable. You just have to move the top of the shock in and out. So hopefully I can show you guys. Let me get it some better light. Okay, so screwing down or clockwise lowers the chassis, so it's colliding with the washer. Whereas I think unscrewing it up, hold on here. Alright, so here's an issue I found, and I forgot to mention this. The collars that hold the springs on, they're very tight sometimes with the body of the shock, so that kind of locks it in place. So really, sometimes you might have to actually move this piece here that has the little teeth cut into it. Yeah, so it got stuck. Alright, so now you can see the thread starting to show up. I went too far. Now you can use it, but I guess if you tighten it all the way down, that's where I think the friction from the black plastic piece here and here is what locks it in place. So keep that in mind. As long as it's not touching plastic on plastic, it moves pretty freely. Okay, so I apologize for that, but hey, my mistakes will hopefully save you guys some time. So you can see the suspension is way high right now. So I'm going to tighten this clockwise, and then you can see the base went down a lot. Let me go up again. There, so you can see the gap, right? So it doesn't actually take much turning of these top screws to actually lower the thing. Okay, so hopefully you saw the chassis move. So that's basically around 2 millimeters because it's now scraping that 2 millimeter washer. Okay, so the front is the same way. You just screw and unscrew, you know, these things, making sure that there's no plastic on plastic friction. And then yeah, again, I went back. There's a little plastic collar in here. I went and sanded the inside of the shock so it didn't have much stiction. You know, the suspension works nicely now. There's no friction going on in it. Okay, so those are some tips there. Hopefully they'll help you out. I haven't really bothered, you know, I haven't done the toe in, toe out, which are these lines here, but I know I will sooner or later. So you might wonder why these are here. They're just here to hold the chassis in place, because the thing is so slick. It's very easy to distort, you know, the alignment of this thing. So you just gotta, you know, align this center white line with the center of the vehicle. I literally removed that bolt right there, this bolt here, and I looked through it and saw the white line. So that's how I aligned the front one. And don't use the belts, because this thing can actually slide left and right. You can see, right? So the belt's not a good reference. I essentially just used both ends of the carbon plate here to center this thing. You can see my chassis is really messed up right now. Okay, well anyways. So that's just there when I get into adjusting the toe in, the toe out, and stuff like that. Okay. So hopefully you learned something there. Let's talk about the electronics now, because I had some serious time wasting going on with this. So first I gotta talk about the radio. I learned about this radio on, you know, Beaver's RC channel, and it's the RadioLink RC4GS. So big, I gotta back out again. Hold on. So for the price, it seems to be pretty good. It has everything you want, in particular like the endpoint adjustments, so you can tell the servo to stop at a certain point instead of it colliding with like the frame or something. So that's what I like about that thing. But it does come, you know, at a budget. It's a budget price. So the first thing I realized is the battery tray, or the the battery connector. It has this old red JST thing. I haven't seen a battery pack use this in a long time. Maybe like the cheap RTRs come with this. So I don't actually have any batteries with this thing on it, and I didn't have any extra of these to make an adapter. So I ended up just using other adapters that I do have, and I put a new lead onto the tray here if you want to use AA batteries, and so that would go here. But one note here, you'll notice I sharpied in some positive and negatives because this connector doesn't have a tooth on it, so you can easily put the connector in the wrong way so it has reverse polarity. So basically you just want to have the positive lead on this side. So let me go and install that. It's in a really weird location too. Okay, so now that I have this little connector from like some drones and stuff, I can choose to just add the tray, you know, or in my case I'm going to use a different battery pack that I have. So I made this new connector, another adapter, because this battery pack has an XT60 on it, which requires another adapter, XT30 to XT60. I don't know why we just can't eliminate the older connectors. XT60, XT30, call it a day. Anyway, so I literally have to have like 17 different things because I want to use this, which is a main pack to power up a different RC vehicle. So that's why it has the heavy gauge connector on it. Okay, so the main thing is you just gotta note that battery connector, you can accidentally put it in the wrong way. Okay, now this radio came with a 6-channel receiver, the RC R6FG, so it's got a gyro in there. Okay, so it's a huge, you know, item for a micro RC car. If you look at this chassis, it's too big to really put on the base plate because the battery goes here. I managed to get the servo, the gyro here, although I'm not going to use it right now. But it just doesn't leave much room, right? So my intention was to remove this case, which I did, and then I thought to remove the actual pins and try to direct solder the servo and the throttle to those holes there. So I learned a lesson here. I was desoldering it from the back side. So as I hit it with my soldering iron and it heated up, I took some pliers and pulled it out. But hopefully it can focus properly. You can see each of these is supposed to have a gold ring, and when I pulled these pins out, it literally tore up the fiberglass and the gold ring. So the conductivity is gone. When I hooked this all up, the LED wouldn't light up because there's no signal getting to this side of the PCB board. So what I'm getting at now, don't try to remove the pins because it's going to end up like this. I pretty much destroyed this receiver. It can't be used ever again. So I did order a 4-channel one, and this is an even bigger problem. This is not a problem of a radio link. This is a problem because I'm a moron. Alright, but this is a problem of radio link. This is their 4-channel receiver that also has a gyro, but I'm not going to use that. It is labeled in the traditional sense where channel 1, 2, 3, 4, just like the 6-channel one, which made sense. So channel 1 is supposed to be the steering servo, and then channel 2 is the throttle, and then the right side is the ground, all the black cables. The red cable is the voltage in the middle, and then the signal cable is usually white or a different color, and that's on the left side. So I hooked everything up to this thing and wondered what is wrong. Did I destroy something? Nothing was working. This sticker is backwards. Number 4 is channel 1. Number 3 is channel 2, and I have to assume number 2 is 3 and number 1 is 4. So if you buy this thing, which you really don't have a choice because you have to use the receivers for the proper transmitter, right? This isn't a multi-protocol transmitter, unfortunately. In fact, I don't know why someone doesn't make a steering wheel type of transmitter that's multi-protocol. It exists for like flying objects, quadcopters and stuff. There are controllers that'll run pretty much every protocol. So someone's got to make one in this format so you can use anyone's receivers. I digress. Sorry. So let's go and hook this thing up here. So let me get a different angle again. So the battery I bought, actually, this is another segue. When I ordered this from Chan RC, I asked what battery should we use. He said a 300 milliamp hour from Turnigy, the Nanotech. And it was just too expensive where I live, so I ordered this off Banggood, and it showed up in like a week, so that's nice. And actually, this Banggood one has a higher C voltage. Maybe it doesn't matter. But the problem is, it's a really tight fit. It eventually will fit, but I had to trim off some of this protective clearness so the wires can go up more. But you can see this is the carbon plate that holds the battery, and so I think a Turnigy battery is wider, whereas this one is thinner but width-wise a lot longer. So just be mindful of that. You know, this will work. It's just a super tight fit, and you know, I think they designed, Drift-Part2 designed it around the Turnigy battery pack. Okay, well anyways, let's see, we hook this up here. The flat side is the positive, so obviously when you're soldering up your leads or whatever, make sure they match. Now another thing, the cable here, this Team Powers set here, the motor and the ESC are by Team Powers. It comes with 2 of these. One's a spare, I guess. This is the Hall sensor cable. This is a censored system. So if you look very closely, hopefully you can see one side of this connector has shiny contacts, right? And then the other side, that just is the black wire. So when you're hooking this up, you got to make sure that you find those contacts first, you know, and just make sure you're hooking the contact to the contacts. Otherwise, it's just frustrating, really. Okay. Also, you know, when you have 4 very thin wires like this, they get snagged on things. It's very easy to snag or possibly tear out. So I took some oversized heat shrink and got it around that white connector, and then I shrank it down just to protect it a little bit. But now I'm thinking I should put 2 or 3 different pieces on so I can actually bend this thing easier. It's kind of weird right now, right? It's just strange to have it like this. If I had 3 pieces of heat shrink, I could have a little more articulation into this thing. But I, at least right now, don't have to worry about ripping out one of those wires. Okay, so I'm going to skip the gyro for now. And this servo that came from Chan RC, it comes with an adapter cable, luckily. Let me just find it. I also wonder why, like, every radio transmitter company should have a receiver with these smaller connectors on it. Just like this, you know, just like the gyro has. Instead of these giant old school connectors. I mean, these giant old school connectors are fine for like 10 scale vehicles or bigger. But, you know, I think micro RC vehicles have been around long enough that the market's there to have more micro receivers. Alright, so there's a slot. I was just putting it backwards. Okay. Alright, so it's weird. I'm putting the steering into channel 4 on this thing because it's mislabeled. I wasted an hour wondering what was going on. I tested the stuff with another radio system. And anyways, so this cable here that comes with the ESC, it's directional. It's got little teeth on it, or grooves. So you can't screw that up. Alright. I had to put this back on because originally this was soldered, you know, to this thing. and I will probably solder it to this thing later once everything's set up and working properly. So now this is going into channel 3 on the receiver because it's mislabeled. So after I did that, everything worked. There's a power button on this ESC here. Okay, I'm going to turn the radio on. I guess I'll show you how this thing works, binding it and stuff. Okay, when you turn this thing on, there's like a signal meter, just like on your phone. Right now it actually is paired, but you got this light here on the receiver, and right here there's a button I'm going to push with my thumb, and if I hold that button down, the green light's going to start flashing. There, it started flashing. Now the transmitter, the signal went away. Once it goes solid, there, the signal's back. So it's really easy to pair. Alright, I think well, there it is. Yeah, there, it works. I would recommend that you don't have the horn hooked up when you first set it up the first time, because it might just torque into it might break it, who knows, it depends how strong your servo is. So you want to make sure the horn isn't detached when you first set up electronics. Okay, so that's set. Now I'm going to show you guys how to hook up the ESC. So the Team Powers does have these instructions, and they do actually make sense. I had a hard time because the freaking receiver was so mislabeled. But now that I figured it out, I know how it's done. Okay, so I'm actually going to disconnect the battery. So you want to hold this power button down as you hook up the battery. So I'm literally going to press this connector against that switch, and then I'm going to hook up this thing. And what we're looking for is a blue LED to become solid. That's not particularly clear in the instructions. It says blue LED, but alright, well anyways, let me get this going here. So I heard the click. Alright, when it first came on, the red and blue were on, but now it's only the blue solid. So now it's in throttle programming mode. Okay. Also, it's not a good idea to have the belt hooked up. So, in fact, you should probably have loose tension on this thing, because if you hook this up the first time, it goes crazy, right? The thing's, who knows what'll happen. It might tear the belt. Alright, so now that this is hooked up, if I pull the throttle all the way, it's flashing. It beeps. When it's flashing red, I'm reversing the throttle. It beeps again, then I let go. Once those two lights turn solid like that, that means it's programmed. I think I have to turn it off. So I hold it down for like a second, turn it on again. Okay. So flashing blue, I guess, just means it's in neutral. Both lights means it's accelerating, and then solid red means you're braking. So neutral or doing nothing, accelerate, braking. Okay, so not too hard. Hopefully, maybe I saved you some time, maybe not. Let me turn this off and we'll go into the body mounts here. The chassis itself can use Kyosho Mini Z bodies, and it's designed to do that. It has a carbon plate that can, tongue and groove into the front end of a Kyosho body. This part here, and then this carbon plate here, which you can adjust with these two bolts here, can slide forward and back a little bit. And there's two grooves here for high and low adjustment of those plastic tabs that are usually glued on here. But magnetics just seem to be a lot easier to use. They're harder to set up, but in the long run, I think they're easier to use. So that's what I chose to do. I got this magnetic body kit also from Chan RC, but I had to use additional spacers. I ran out of washers that came with the kit. It comes with different size standoffs, and it's understandable because every Kyosho body is going to have a different interior, right? So what I did here, after I hooked up the standoffs, and it took a couple hours to do this, by the way, I hot glued the back ends first. So after I tightened these down, I put a piece of tape on the top of all the magnets, and then I put the solid magnet on top of that, and then I put a little dab of hot glue on these two back ones. And so imagining there's magnets on here and hot glue, then I put it into the body. Oh, look at that. So that one came out. So that's an issue I was going to talk about, but we'll wait a second. So that came off this side, right? So I did something like that, but with tape. Put hot glue on, and then I slammed it in there. And then once those are lightly on, the back ones are on, I did the same for the front, and then once all four of them were on, I went back and added a whole bunch more hot glue. But as you can clearly see, these magnets, they have a pretty slick surface. There's nothing for the glue to grab hold of. So this one already fell out, so I put a big dab of super glue in there, and then I put the magnet in. And so I'm going to have to put a big dab of super glue in this, and again, do the same. So hold on, a little super glue. Now be mindful, magnets have polarity, so you got to make sure you put the magnet on the correct side. So for me, if this is going in this way, it has to go onto this magnet. There, make sure it's on this magnet. If you put it in the wrong way, you're going to have to rip this whole thing out and do it all over again. Well, alright. Unfortunately, because at least know what side the glue is on. Alright. So that might have to take a while to cure. Hopefully it'll stay in there. If it continues to be a problem, what I'm thinking is you could just put a piece of tape over the magnet here and then hot glue that piece of tape down so it's trapping the magnets in place. Or maybe a piece of cloth or something like that, since cloth is a little more porous. So put a piece of cloth over this and then hot glue that cloth down. We'll have to see if this holds up. Okay, so that's what I experienced with the magnets, but even after I put these on, I noticed there were some issues, like the wheel base, even though I measured it, it just, I don't know if there's flex or whatnot, right? You can see it's a little bit off there even. So what I did after I had the magnets on is I loosened the chassis bolts and I loosened those plates up there before I put it on, and then I just moved, slid it in and out until the wheels were in proper alignment. I think this one might be a little off because I was messing with the toe in, toe out, which are these two screws. See, so you can adjust the toe in, toe out. Alright, well, that's going to be some fine tuning they'll do later. You shouldn't really align the wheel based off the body because the body might be crooked. I really need to align this off the whatever these things are called, tuning plate or whatever. And then if I have to loosen up these magnet mounts and then adjust the position of the magnets again. Alright. Is there anything else? Right now, no. I'm going to have to take it for a few spins. These are old wheels from my old Mini Z, so I don't even think they're flat anymore. So I might have to adjust the camber of these. After I run it, I'll know exactly where it's touching on the floor. And then later I'm going to add some LEDs into all this stuff. I'm waiting for a voltage step down because I have like different voltage LEDs. So that'll come later. I guess there'll be a third video to come after I have this all figured out. So hopefully you learned a little bit, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.